Hello everyone, I welcome you in the virtual classroom of Managerial Economics. We are discussing unit number 2, production function, and in that we are discussing first part, that is economies and diseconomies of scale. Up till now we have completed economies of scale, and in today's lecture we are moving towards diseconomies of scale. At the time of discussing economies of scale, I have given you the definition that when production increases, per unit cost reduces. That is known as economies of scale. But if we keep on increasing production, then our per unit cost will increase, which is known as diseconomies of scale. That we have seen in the introductory lecture in one of the graph. In this, here we have seen that in first part production increases and cost reduces. That is why it is written here economies of scale. But after a point, if we continues to increase the production, the per unit cost increases, which is written as diseconomies of scale. The meaning is when you start your business, initially we are having the benefit of economies of scale, and the benefit will be replaced by the loss in the latter part of business, which is known as diseconomies of scale. Here we simply need to remember is that if we move more than a point for increase in our production, then diseconomies will start. In this graph, here Q1 point is a minimum point, which is a sign that firm should not expand beyond the Q1 point. If you will expand beyond the Q1 point, your cost increases. So what to do? That a firm should not increase beyond a point. In diseconomies of scale, we will learn that when firm is expanding beyond a point, then there is diseconomies of scale. Now let us see in detail. The word diseconomies refers to all those losses which accrue to the firms in the industry due to expansion of their output to a certain limit. That we have just seen in the graph that if you go beyond a limit for expansion, then there is a diseconomies of scale. These diseconomies arise due to the use of unskilled laborers, outdated methods of production, etc. Here, one thing we should note that the diseconomies is because of use of unskilled labor and outdated methods of production. These two could be the main reason for diseconomies of scale. In the lectures of economies of scale, we have seen that there are two types of economies of scale, which are internal and external. The same thing happens in diseconomies. There are also two types of diseconomies, which are internal diseconomies and external diseconomies. If we look at the meaning of internal and external diseconomies, then it goes like if your cost increases due to the reason situated within the organization, then it is known as internal diseconomies of scale. But if your cost increases because of the reason situated outside the organization, then it is known as external diseconomies of scale. One more difference between internal and external diseconomies is that the internal diseconomies is related to single firm, one firm only. Why? Because it is reason is within the organization. Whereas if we talk about external diseconomies, then it is related to each and every firm within an industry. Why? Because the reason of cost increase is outside the organization within the industry. That is why each of the firm will suffer from external diseconomies of scale. Now, let us first of all discuss the internal diseconomies. There are five types of internal diseconomies, which are inefficient management, technical difficulties, production diseconomies, marketing diseconomies, and financial diseconomies. Now, let us understand in detail. The first one, inefficient management. The main cause of internal diseconomies is the lack of efficient or skilled management. When a firm expands beyond a certain limit, it becomes difficult for the manager to manage it efficiently or to coordinate the process of production. Moreover, it becomes very difficult to supervise the work spread all over, which adversely affect the operational efficiency. Take an example that initially you have started your business with the sole proprietorship. Now you know very well what is a sole proprietorship, where only single owner is there who works from peon to managing director. Every task, every responsibility rests on his shoulder only. The sole proprietorship is a small scale level of business organization, but if you expand your business, then it may happen that a single owner expand to a level that converted in a joint stock company. Now you just take an example, the level of activities in sole proprietorship, which was very less, it was limited in amount. Maybe due to that reason the owner is successful in earning the profit. Why? Because the size of the organization is very small. Now, thinking that the owner is successful in sole proprietorship, he would be also successful if he convert his sole proprietorship in a joint stock company, which is not true. It is not necessary that if a person gets success as a sole proprietor, then he will also get success as a CEO of company. No. Why? Because there is a huge difference between the level of activities in sole proprietorship and in joint stock company. In sole proprietorship, the scale and the area of operation, it is very much limited and very much small. Whereas in case of joint stock company, the area of operation is expanded to an enormous extent, which may be beyond the physical and mental capacity of the owner, and which may result into the failure of handling the business affairs. Sometimes it may happen that, take an example, that what is the task of CEO? He himself will not perform any physical activity. He will just hand over the responsibility to the staff hired by them, and the task of CEO will remain for the strategic purpose and to coordinate the work within the organization. Now take an example that in case of sole proprietorship, he was performing everything on himself. There was no coordination. But now in case of joint stock company, the role of coordination comes into the picture. So as a owner, he may be good, but as a coordinator, he may be worst. And due to that reason, your business may get failure. What what is the conclusion? What is the crux of this discussion? That the owner result as the inefficient manager, and because of his incapability of handling the affairs of the business, because of his incapacity of non-coordination of the business activities, his business gone for their losses. In sole proprietorship, we can say the first phase of business, there were more production and less cost, but when they have expanded, means sole proprietor converted into joint stock company, production increases and cost increases. What is the reason? Reason is inefficient management. Then we have seen that moreover it becomes very difficult to supervise the work spread all over, which adversely affect the operational efficiency. As I have told you earlier, that as a owner he may be successful, but as a coordinator he may not be successful, which hamper your operational efficiency. Then the second diseconomies is technical difficulties. Another major reason for the onset of internal diseconomies is the emergence of technical difficulties. In every form, there is an optimum point of technical economies that we have seen that in the graph Q1 was an optimum point beyond which if you will increase the production then the diseconomies get started. Likewise, every firm is having a point optimum point for technical economies. If you go beyond that point then your economies turn out to be diseconomies. If a firm operates beyond this technical limits, diseconomies will emerge out. For instance, if an electricity generating plant has the optimum capacity of 1 million kilowatts of power, it will have the lowest cost per unit when it produces 1 million kilowatts. Beyond this optimum point, technical economies will stop and technical diseconomies will result. Take an example that your machine is having the capacity of only 1 million kilowatt, then you should produce only 1 million kilowatt. In greed of earning more and more profit, if you overrun your machine, take an example that suppose you are producing 1.5 million kilowatt, then definitely your cost per unit will increase. How? It will result into lesser life of your machine. Take an example that if you produce only 1 million kilowatt, then what happen that it machinery runs within a capacity. You take your example, every human being is having a physical capacity. If you go beyond your physical capacity, your energy will get exhausted and you will feel tired. Take an example that you are given a task of producing a pen. Initially you will learn it, then you will become master of it, and you will able to produce pen in a least possible cost. But let us imagine that per day you can produce 50 pens, and after producing 50 pens your energy is exhausted, and if you will try to produce 60 pens per day, then what will happen that first of all your mood will not be for production, there you will take much time, there will be wastage of material because now your mental faculties are getting tired and you don't have capacity to work. So is the case with machinery, they are having capacity. If you work within a capacity they will work well, their life will be intact, એની જેટલી લાઈફ હશે એટલું એ ચાલશે, there will be less depreciation, then there will be less repair will be required. But if you overuse it, then what will happen, the life of machinery will reduce. If the life of machinery will reduce, then the depreciation will increase. Then what will happen, depreciation is one kind of cost only, your per unit cost will increase, which will result into uh, increase in production and increase in cost. In simple terms we term it as a diseconomies of scale. What is the reason behind increasing the cost in this example is the over usage of machinery, and that we term it as technical difficulties. Then production diseconomies. The diseconomies of production manifest themselves when the expansion of firm's production leads to rise in the cost per unit of output. It may be due to the use of inferior or less efficient factors, as the efficient factors are in scarcity. It happens when the size of the firm surpasses the optimum size. Here we are discussing about production diseconomies simply means you are increasing the production and your cost is increasing. Both is increasing, production is increasing and cost is increasing. What is the reason? Take an example that the ideal capacity of industry. I am not saying company, I am saying the word industry. The ideal capacity of the industry is to produce 1000 unit. For the sake of simplicity, we are keeping the figure lowest possible. The ideal capacity of industry to produce only 1000 unit. What does it mean? That to produce 1000 unit, enough raw material is in supply. enough labors are there to produce a product. But if you produce more than 1000, take an example that you produce 2000 units, what will happen? Industry is not having that much raw material to produce 2000 units. In that case, what you will do? You will try to use the inferior raw material. Why? Because the qualitative raw materials are in scarcity. It is exhausted that you have utilized for producing 1000 units. Now if you want to produce more 1000 units, you may have to compromise with the quality of the raw material. First thing. Secondly, the labors were not enough to produce more 1000 units. Then you have to hire the unskilled labor, and you know very well that unskilled labors will perform the activities with the wastage of raw material, and they will take too much time. So what will happen? That your cost of production increases due to two reasons. First, due to inferior raw material, you have compromised with the quality, and secondly, due to usage of unskilled laborers, that your cost of production increases. That is what written here. It may be due to use of inferior or less efficient factors, as the efficient factors are in scarcity. Enough raw materials were not there, enough labors were not there. So what we have done? We have done compromise with both of the things. We have used inferior quality of raw material, and we have also used the unskilled labors, which result into higher cost of production. Again, I am repeating, production increases beyond a limit, and our cost increases because of the inferior quality of raw material and unskilled labor, which is known as production diseconomies. Then next diseconomies is marketing diseconomies. After an optimum scale, the further rise in the scale of production is accompanied by selling diseconomies. It is due to many reasons. See, we have seen marketing economies when we were discussing internal economies. There we have seen that marketing economies is having two perspectives. One is from the production point of view, purchasing point of view, and second is from marketing point of view. But in diseconomies, we have separated this both perspective. From purchasing point of view, we have included in the production diseconomies, where we have talked about the raw material. So now only one perspective remain in the marketing diseconomies, that is about selling only. That is what written here. The further rise in the scale of production is accompanied by selling diseconomies. Means here our cost increases because of our marketing functions. Firstly, the advertisement expenditure is bound to increase more than proportionately with scale. Secondly, the overheads of marketing increase more than proportionately with the scale. Take an example that you have increased your production, and if you have increased the production, you have to sell more. So earlier, if we take an example that we were covering the state market, and then we have started covering the national market. But if you still increase your production, then where to go? Take an example. For the sake of simplicity, we are assuming that we don't have international access. International market access is not available to us. Then we have to sell within a nation, and we have already tapped the national market. And if you still increasing the production, what will happen? Supply will increase, demand is not that much in a market, so price will reduce, profit will reduce. First thing. Secondly, if you don't want to reduce the price of the product, then what you will try to do? You will influence the demand to cope up with the supply. So to influence the demand, you have to give advertisement. Earlier, for tapping the national market, you had given the advertisement in a national media. But now you have to use brand ambassador, because you want to influence more people. Now you know the fees of the brand's ambassador, the celebrities, how much they are charging. Now just compare how much you are expending behind hiring the celebrities and how much growth you are realizing in the sale of the product. Is it more than the fees that you have paid to the brand ambassador? No. Then your cost per unit will increase and profit per unit will reduce. Simply we term it as a diseconomies of scale because of the advertisement expenditure. Then secondly, it is written here, the overheads of marketing increase more than proportionately with the scale. For selling more quantities, you have to hire the more marketing staff. You have to hire the more salesmen. Definitely, you have to give the more salaries. Your salesman has to be available to each and every corner of the nation for selling your product. Yes or no? Then, how much salarical expenditure you are incurring, and compare your salarical expenditure with increase in your selling. It must be lesser than increase in the selling must be lesser than the salarical expenditure. Then it results into marketing diseconomies. Means the expenditure behind doing a marketing activities are more as compared to the increase in a selling, which results into marketing diseconomies. Then financial diseconomies. If the scale of production increases beyond the optimum scale, the cost of financial capital rises. It may be due to relatively more dependence on external finances. Take an example that you are having the form of organization which is joint stock company, and you know that in joint stock company the sources of finance are internal and external. In internal we are taking as ownership capital, equity share capital is there, and then in borrowed capital we can have debentures, bonds, bank loans, etc. Take an example that you have initially started your company with the owners fund, but if you want to do an expansion, then you have to raise fund from the market. Take an example that you have taken loan from the bank, and with that loan you have expanded your production and you are sufficiently in earning the profit. If you still want to increase your production, and take an example that second time you are going to the bank asking for a loan, will bank give you second time loan at the same interest rate that they have offered you earlier? Take an example that first time you have taken loan at 9% per annum, and if you go to the second time for raising a loan, they will definitely not give you the loan in 9%. The interest rate will be more than 9%, it may be 12 to 15%. Why? Because now bank perceives risk in your business more. What they will think? With first time loan, with one loan, it wouldn't be much enough for you to expand a business that you come for second time raising a loan. Wasn't money enough for expansion of your business? They were questioning on your credit worthiness. What they will think that he must not be having enough capacity to earn the maximum out of the limited capital resources, and that's why he's seeking for a loan. You yourself imagine that you have taken loan for your personal purpose. If you are asking someone for one time help, they will definitely give you without much thinking. But if you will ask same person to help you second time, he will think that wasn't it enough my first help? Why he is in need of second help? The person must be issue with this person. Yes or no? There is a question on your credit worthiness which increases the risk of your business and which results into higher interest rate. When you are paying the more interest, your financial expenditure increases, which we term it as an increase in a cost of production. Why our cost is increasing? Because we want to produce more. We are taking loan second and third time, which available to us in higher interest rate, which results into higher interest cost. Simple is the reason why our cost is increasing because of our financial expenditure, because of our interest expenditure. To conclude, diseconomies emerge beyond an optimum scale. The internal diseconomies lead to rise in the average cost of production in contrast to the internal economies, which lower the average cost of production. That I have just given you example that if you ask for the second time loan, your interest rate will increase and your financial cost will also increase. We are keeping our lecture here only. In today's lecture, we have completed the internal diseconomies, and in next lecture, we will deal with the external diseconomies of scale. Thank you.